All right, well, good morning. So to get us started, I've got a couple questions for you guys. And I'm going to need some feedback, okay? So if somebody were to give you a quarter, okay? You need to buy a pop from the fridge and you need 2 quarters. You've got one. You need a second one. You ask somebody, they give you a quarter. What's the appropriate way to say thank you? I've got a thumbs up. Just a polite, hey, thanks. Okay? What about if somebody bakes you a cake and brings it over to you and just says, hey, here. Not just a piece, but like you get the entire thing. What's the appropriate way to say thank you then? A what? You send a card. Okay? Well, most people can't read my handwriting. So that may work for some people. Maybe a more enthusiastic thank you. Right? Maybe like a muffled thank you, because you've started eating the cake already. So let's get a little bit bigger. What about if somebody gifts you a car? Ooh, that'd be pretty cool, right? How do you say thank you then? Now you're definitely writing a card, right? I mean, you would be obligated to at that point. Just keep taking it bigger. What about if somebody has granted you life or gives you life? What's the appropriate way of saying thank you at that point? So if you go to Luke 12:48, I've got it up on the screen here, I believe, right there. This is going to introduce the idea for us, and then we're going to turn to our passage that we're going to go over today, and then we're going to circle back to this idea at the very end, okay? So, but the one who did not know it and committed acts deserving of a beating will receive only a few blows. This is the key part of the whole verse right there. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. Okay, and this is Jesus talking here, and just a little bit earlier, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and Peter asks, hey, are you telling this to the believers, or are you telling this to the crowd? Who are you telling this to? And Jesus basically answers him and says, the person who knows what the master wants and does it, more will be given to him. Right? And then he follows it up with this. And so I want to key in on the phrase there. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. Okay? Much will be demanded. Our text that we're actually going to is 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 1. And I just want us to hold on to that idea. How to say thank you. From him who has been given much, much will be demanded. And so hopefully I've given you enough time so you can flip there in your own Bible. If not, it is up there on the screen. It says, therefore, prepare your minds for action. Keep sober in spirit. Set your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the lusts which were yours in your ignorance, but like the Holy One who has called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior. Because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. And so we're going to break this down a little bit. The first word we've got there is therefore, which prompts us to ask the question, what is it there for, right? It is a connecting, it is a conjunction, comparing or tying together 2 thoughts, the thought previous and the thought that's going to come. So what comes before verse 13? Well, Peter's describing here salvation's supreme place in God's foreordained plan. He is explaining the marvelous promise of the eternal inheritance. He is proclaiming God's intrinsic greatness in verse 1 through 12. He's talking about how great salvation is. And because it is so great, therefore, because it is so great, now we have something to do. So Peter's making a shift from describing and explaining in the first 12 verses to commanding or telling us that because of that we're supposed to do this. Okay? And so he's explaining us on how we're supposed to live. So how are we supposed to live? Well, we're going to jump down to the middle of verse 13 to grab the main thought here, and that is to set your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Fix your hope. Fix your hope is what it says. And that really is our first point. Fix your hope completely on the grace. Okay? What does that mean? Well, to fix something, you're going to anchor it. You're going to make it secure. You're going to tie it down, so to speak, right? You guys remember like strapping something to a trailer? And whose dad pops the strap and like, oh yeah, it'll hold. Anybody else? I think that's like something you're required to do as a dad. After strapping something down, you're supposed to be, oh yeah, it'll hold, right? So it's kind of the idea. You are setting your hope. You are making it secure. It's not going to move. It's not going anywhere, right? And just to be safe, we're going to sink a couple screws in it just to make sure it can't move, right? We are setting our hope on the grace. So I've got to find my notes here, guys. I am sorry. 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians. Where am I at? I don't have 1 Corinthians on here. 1 Corinthians says this, but now faith, hope, and love remain. But the greatest of these is, you guys know it? Love. Okay? So hope hits right there at the top three, right? And I'm guessing if you've been in church for any a number of times or for an extended period of time, you've heard messages on faith. You've heard messages on love. But have there been a lot on hope? And I was trying to remember through, and I think a lot of times hope's kind of like sprinkled in there. We're supposed to have hope. We're supposed to get hope from all this stuff. But it hasn't been really the main point as I've thought through. And so I want to hit a little bit here on hope. What is hope? Because hope is not how we use it in our English language today. See, hope is like, man, I hope somebody has ice cream sandwiches for me after the message here. Like, that'd be kind of cool, right? Or I hope nobody saw me just trip on air coming into church this morning, right? What am I saying when I say I'm hoping? I'm saying I'm wishing. I want, right? And so the internet describes it as the wanting of something to be the case or to happen. The wanting. That's not what hope is here. Okay? Hope here doesn't mean, oh, I wish, or I long for, or maybe, possibly, could it be? That's not what we see here. Hope is very close to what faith is, right? You guys, I'm sure you guys have heard the analogy where you've got your chair, right? And faith is that you believe that that chair will hold you up if you sit in it, right? Who checked their seat before sitting down today? You just expected it to hold you up, right? Or if you're a little kid, you just knew it was going to, so you came running from across the room and ran and jumped in that seat, right? That is what faith is, the complete belief in. Hope is very similar. Hope is very similar. However, hope doesn't leave there to be any room for a wishing or a wanting. It is 100%. It is going to happen. It will happen. There's no question about it. It's not wishing. It's not wanting. It will happen. Hope is the equivalent to faith. It is trusting God. And where the big difference between faith and hope is faith is trusting God today for what God has said in his word. And hope is for the future. So here hope is saying that whatever that what Peter has said in the verse 1 through 12, right? The inheritance. Hope is saying that will happen. There's no question about it. There's no guessing. It will happen. That is what hope is. It's not this wanting or wishing. It's 100% known because God is faithful in the past. He is faithful today, and we know that he will be faithful in the future. John MacArthur says it like this: faith accepts and hope expects. Faith believes God for what he has done, and hope believes God for what he will do. There's this future sense. It's kind of our thought of how we're looking towards the future. If we have hope, we have full assurance that God is going to do exactly what he said he is going to do. And what he said he is going to do is really found in 1 Peter verse 3. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Verse 4, to obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not fade away, reserved in heaven for you. Right? This is talking about salvation. It's talking about the completion of salvation there. And that hope is the assured belief that it will happen. There's no question about if that will happen or not. So we are to set our hope completely. Set your hope completely. This is unreservedly. This is not half-heartedly. This is, well, most days. It's not, well, if I'm in the right crowd, right? If I'm around the right friends, in the right setting. This is completely, wholly, 100% again here. Completely on the grace. And you guys catch it. Set your hope completely on the grace. It's not completely on Jesus. It's not completely on, it's on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So what it's talking about here is the second coming, right? Oh, how glorious that will be. That's going to be awesome. It's the second coming of Christ. And when we talk about salvation, there's really three phases that you could mention here. There's justification, sanctification, and then glorification. So justification is the forgiveness of sin. So forgiveness of sin that you have committed, and that when you become a child of Christ, when you go to Christ for salvation, you are justified. And then when God looks at you on the day of judgment, he sees Christ standing in your place. He sees you just as if you had never sinned. That is justification, right? And so that's what God has done. Sanctification is what God is doing now, and that is separating us from the present power of sin. Sanctification is the power to change. We can grow to be like Christ through God's power. And then glorification is God's final removal of sin. This is where we stand before him, and because all sin has been removed, we can stand before him faultless, right? We can see his glory. His honor, his praise, his majesty, his holiness will be realized in us at that point when he comes, right? And so note that it's not saying like, set your hope that someday God will come back and there will be bright lights and it's going to be basically like a rock concert and that will be an awesome event. Woo! No, it's not talking about the event, okay? And as cool as the event is going to be, right? A side note, Moses once saw the presence of God pass by him, and then he glowed because of God's glory. At the revelation of Jesus Christ, how bright do you think that's going to be? Right? Like those are fun things that I enjoy thinking about. And then my head starts to hurt. And so I try not to dwell on those things. But that's not what Peter's saying we need to focus on here, okay? We're not focusing on the event. We're not focusing on heaven. We're focusing on the grace that is to be brought. We're focusing on what God is doing there. And so how do we focus? How do we set our hope on the grace? Well, now we've got to back up a little bit into earlier in verse 13, because it tells us two ways to do that. And first it says to prepare your mind for action. Prepare your mind for action. The New King James Version says it like this: therefore, gird up the loins of your mind. Typical attire back when Peter was writing this was what? Robes. Lots of fabric, not very much fabric. Lots of fabric, right? And so in order for them to be able to move quickly, they would reach underneath, they would grab the back of their robe, they would pull it up, and they would tuck it into their belt, basically making shorts, right? This was so that they didn't trip on their robe when they were trying to work, when they were trying to compete in a sporting event, going to battle. They would gird up their loins. And so it's metaphorically here, Peter is addressing this to the mind. You need to make it ready to move. Prepare, get it ready. What do you do when you prepare something? If you're going to prepare a meal, what do? You gather supplies. You make sure you have enough room to cook, right? You're getting things in place to be able to successfully cook that meal. If we are going to prepare our minds or gird up the loins of our minds, we're going to be making it ready. We're tying up loose ends. Very, very similar to fixing, okay? The fix your hope, the prepare your mind, very similar wording. We're going to tie down the loose thoughts that come in and distract us. We're going to make our mind focus on things that are good and pleasing to God. We're not just going to let our mind go crazy. We are preparing it, which means we have control, which means we can do what we can force our mind to dwell on things we want it to, right? We can fix our hope. We can prepare our minds to fix our hope on the grace that is to come. Guys, this is getting our priorities right. It's making sure our priorities are set in place. What's of highest priority? And if it's not God, we need to prepare our minds. We need to make sure we make our minds dwell on what is the highest priority. It's getting rid of the clutter of life that distracts you, just bogs down the mind, right? We're making it ready. We're making it ready for action, right? And this could be done a lot of different ways. It could be just turning off the TV at night rather than watching the new episode, spending time in God's Word, right? Could be being here at church. It could be going to Wednesday night church. It could be in what ways are you showing that life with Christ is the biggest priority? And that's really the idea, is getting your priorities right. See, our hearts are where desires come from. But the gateway to our hearts is through our mind. And whatever we dwell on is going to make its way down to our heart. I grew up with this, the idea of the thought train. You guys all know it, right? Thoughts come first, they lead the train. Whatever you're thinking on, whatever you're dwelling on there is going to lead to action. And then feelings are going to follow suit, right? And so we need to prepare our minds. We need to make sure what we are dwelling on is proper. It is good. It is pleasing to Christ. Guys, I don't know that I could say it any clearer than Paul does in Colossians 3:2, Paul says, set your minds on things above, not on things on the earth. Said pretty clear there, isn't it? We're supposed to make sure our thinking is correct. Okay? The second one is to keep sober in spirit. Right there. Just to keep sober in spirit. Right? This is metaphorically speaking. This means we're not supposed to be intoxicated by the world around us. Not getting caught up in the thrills of life. Not letting life's circumstances change our priorities. It's having self-control, and it's having a disciplined life that says, you know what, God is my highest priority, and I'm going to make that my highest priority. Because it's way too easy to allow life to change those priorities, right? Evie, my 4-year-old, if you don't know Evie, I encourage you to meet her. She is a little crazy sometimes. She's 4, almost 5. In a couple weeks she turns 5. So she is, just like any young child, she is excited for her birthday. Okay? Birthdays are a big deal to 4-year-olds. And so she is shaking with excitement for her birthday. But the other day we tucked the kids in. Me and Kara go back downstairs and we're talking. And Evie comes running down the stairs. Dad, Dad, Dad. First, it's my birthday. Oh, I said, oh, that's cool. Then it's Thanksgiving. Okay. Thanksgiving's good. You know, good food. Then, Dad, it's Christmas. Right? You see the anticipation, the longing, the desire for it to be Christmas time. Now, she's not like most kids where she's looking forward to the presents and the Christmas meals and the family gatherings. No, she is more interested in the ability to be the Grinch. I started it last year, and she is looking forward to being able to steal the Christmas tree and hide it, to take the Christmas decorations and hide it. She has already planned out when she will do this. She already told me where we're going to hide this stuff. And so, sorry, Kara, I ruined it for you now. But, but she's got it all planned out. Like, yeah, the birthday, this is a big deal. This is exciting. But it holds nothing compared to Christmas, right? And so and I can't think of a better way to explain what Peter's kind of talking about here. Like, he's not saying don't have fun, don't interact in this world, don't do anything. But he's saying set your hope. Guys, there's something greater that is coming. Fix your hope on that. Fix your hope on that. Life can be fun, right? There's things we find enjoyable here. And God's not saying we can't enjoy that. But he's saying even within that, we need to make sure our focus is on the eternal. Our focus is on the grace that is to be brought at the revelation of Jesus Christ. That's the goal. And so Evie's joy, her anticipation, her excitement for that to come, right? It really got me thinking, like, man, do I have this overwhelming joy of what's coming? Have I lost my joy of salvation? Of God bringing about the completion of salvation? Have I lost that joy? Have you guys lost the joy? And if you have, guys, this verse, it ties right in on how we're supposed to get it back. That's to prepare your minds for action. That's to keep sober in spirit. And then set your hope. Right? You get to choose to do this. You get to choose it. So set your hope completely on the grace. You do this by preparing your minds and keeping sober in spirit. Right? We get on to the next part of this, and we hit as obedient children. And guys, and I find this hilarious, that Peter is going to say, look at how great salvation is, guys. Look at how glorious it is. You're supposed to think about the future, and then he calls us kids. Right? Have you guys ever tried to teach a kid how to think for the future? Have you guys ever tried to teach your kid delayed gratification? Right? I'll give you a cookie now, or I'll give you 5 cookies tomorrow. What one do they choose? Well, now I want a cookie, right? Almost every time. The thought is here and now. And as excited as Evie is about Christmas time, it's really not affecting how she's living today, right? Like that's excitement when she thinks about it. But does it affect the everyday life? And this is where Peter's going, is that our overwhelming excitement for what is to come should affect everyday life. And so, as obedient children, when we come to Christ for salvation, we become fellow heirs with Christ. We become sons and daughters of God. I tell my daughters all the time that they are princesses. And they are princesses because they are a daughter of the High King, right? That's not just to instill in them who they are in Christ, but that's to remind me that I'm raising a daughter of God, right? And so as obedient children, obedience would be the who they're following. Paul in Ephesians uses similar wording, calls some children of disobedience, children of wrath, right? That's who they're following. Those are non-Christians. Those are non-believers. Obedient children, he's talking about Christians here. Christians, do not be conformed to the former lust in your ignorance. Verse 14 and 15, you really get this put off, you get this put on contrast. Do not be conformed, do not be changed, do not be swayed, right? Your former lust that you're in ignorance, sinful desires, sinful thoughts, evil longings, uncontrolled appetites. Do not be conformed. Do not be swayed by the former lusts of your ignorance before you knew what Christ had done for you. But, right? The word but is linking 2 thoughts, previous and before. It's contrasting them. But be like the Holy One who called you. And so who has called you? God. God has called you. So we are supposed to be like the Holy One who called us. Be holy. I've got to look here. Be like the Holy One who called you. Be holy yourselves in all of your behaviors. How many does this leave out? None. It's an all-inclusive, right? This isn't talking about, with most of your behaviors. With the behaviors that people around town will see, you need to make sure those are holy. But when you get into your own home, right? It's not talking about the hidden ones, or it is talking about the hidden ones as well. In all of your behaviors. In all of our behaviors, we are to be holy. And so that begs the question, what is holy? Right? Well, here it is defined as pure. It's defined as blameless, without blemish. It's perfection, right? We are to be perfect because God is perfect. Now, Peter knows we're not going to hit this mark, right? Peter's an awesome guy, right? He often speaks before he has a chance to think. He does before he has a chance to think sometimes. Peter's your average guy. And so he's not sitting up on a pedestal being like, you guys have to be perfect. No, he knows we're not going to hit this mark. He knows that it's impossible for us to hit this mark. But he also knows that in our striving to reach this perfection, that we will become more aware of our own shortcomings and our need for a Savior. And in doing so, brings us back to setting our hope on the grace that God's going to bring about. Right? God doesn't set the bar at perfection, right? And he is the bar of perfection. We're not just supposed to be holy. But in verse 15, but like the Holy One who called you, be holy. He's setting that bar. That is the aiming point. That is what we are striving for. And when we miss that mark, we realize our need for our Savior. Right? Now, Peter's not saying all of this because of what hope can do for you, or what preparing your minds can do for you, or keeping sober in the Spirit can do for you. Right? And it does a lot. Right? Setting your hope on who God is and what he's doing and what he will do lifts you up and doesn't allow you to get bogged down with some of the stresses of life, right? They become less important in the overall scheme of who God is, right? But that's not why Peter's saying to do this. Peter's saying we need to set our hope on the grace that is to be brought to us at the revelation of Jesus. We do this because it brings God glory. This is why we do it. We get to verse 16, because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. Right? Very similar to verse 15. So why is it written in there? Why is it there? And so you have to go back and look. Verse 16, because it is written. Well, where is it written? Guys, it's written in Leviticus 19, 1 and 2. It says, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. It keeps going. Verse 3. For every one of you shall revere his mother and father, and you shall keep my Sabbaths. Why? Because I am the Lord your God. It keeps going. Verse 10. You shall not glean from the vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen grapes of the vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and the stranger. Why? I am the Lord. Right? So here in Leviticus, these were the list of rules, regulations that the Israelites were supposed to live by, separating them from other cultures around the world. This is what God called holy. It's what he called pure, right? So live this way. Because of Jesus' work on the cross, we are no longer under the Levitical law. We are not under the covenant of the law, but we are under the covenant of grace, right? And so not all of these are still to be followed. Okay? But it points out, why is God saying, be holy because I am holy? And it's quoting back to Leviticus. And why are we supposed to be holy? Why are we supposed to obey? Why are we supposed to do all these things? Because I, the Lord your God, or I am the Lord your God, right? It keeps going. Verse 10, verse 12, shall not swear falsely, you shall not profane my name. Why? I'm the Lord. Verse 14, why? Because I am the Lord. 16, you guys seeing the pattern here? Seen a pattern, right? And it goes on, and it keeps going, and it keeps going. Why do we do this? It's because I am the Lord. Verse 16, verse 18, guys, and it keeps going all the way to Leviticus 22:2, and that's what we've got here on the screen. Tell Aaron and his sons to be careful with the holy gifts of the sons of Israel, which they dedicate to me, as to not profane my holy name. Why? I'm the Lord. You see, God's saying, guys, you don't act like that. I don't want to be associated with that. Right? Why? Because I'm the Lord. You be holy because I am holy. You're supposed to be a light in the world for me. This is how you need to act. You need to be separated. There needs to be a difference. Because you know the truth. God's called us away from immorality and the uncleanness. And he demands that we be holy. Why? Because he's holy. And he has associated himself with you. He's identified himself with you in his internally glorious work of his saving grace, right? He's linked himself. So your actions are a reflection upon, right? Why are we called to be holy? Because God's holy. And he is the Lord, right? And a lot of us feel pressure to be holy, right? Growing up as a pastor's kid, I did feel a lot of pressure from the church, from other people's parents, from a lot of different areas. Why, right? And I'm sure you guys feel similar, but you feel pressure from the church that you're supposed to do the right thing, right? You feel pressure from, maybe it's Christian friends. You've got to act a certain way around them because you don't know what they're going to say. Maybe it's fear of being called out, right? That's never fun. Maybe it's bigger fear of getting in a lot of trouble, right? And so a lot of us feel the pressure to be holy. But really this idea is, it comes down to, why do we want to be holy? And that's because of our relationship with God. It's because of who God is. And if God, holy, perfect, is willing to pay the penalty for my sin, to give me grace to battle sin that's here and today and allow my life to change, and is willing to give me future grace that is going to be brought at the time of the revelation of Jesus Christ, the glorification. That relationship should drive me to a desire to live my life in light of what he's done, right? So we started this morning. This is going to be way shorter than I originally thought it was going to be. But that's okay, right? We started this morning by asking, what would be an appropriate thank you for a quarter, for a car, right? Luke 12:48, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. That thought, that idea, right? And what has God done for us? Is there any greater gift than the gift of salvation? And if we've been given such a great gift, what's required? What's required is not lackadaisical living. It's not being comfortable with where we are, so we'll just kind of keep moseying through. Guys, there's a call to something bigger. There's a call to something greater here. Guys, live in light of what's going to happen in the future. That God's going to bring about the completion of salvation, right? and living in that light, that means we're going to be sharing that with others around us. That at some point, it's not worth just staying quiet about it in my own little bubble, because life is comfortable. But because we know who God is, we want to share that. So the only appropriate way to say thank you there would be to fully live for Christ. To set your mind, prepare your mind for action. Keep sober in spirit. To set your hope completely, not most of the way, right? And not by comparison, right? Well, I've got my mind more set on the grace to come than they do. So, basically all right. And, right? We almost try to lower the bar of what's expected of us. We try to take it down a notch. We try to reason it. Well, there's no way I can reach perfection, so why try? Well, nobody's perfect, right? We try to reason it down to a level where we think we might be able to get to, right? And really, all the while we're doing that, we're deceiving ourselves, saying, you know what, God, basically, if plan 1 didn't work out, I could have been your plan 2, right? I could have, which is foolish, right? So we need to strive for the bar, okay? Knowing we're not going to hit it. But that does mean we're working towards it. We're growing towards it. I tell my youth, I tell the staff at camp, what is the purpose of life, right? And I stole it from my grandpa. But he says when he goes and shakes you at 3 o'clock in the morning, fire, 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 shakes you, wake you up, and says, what's the purpose of life? He wants you to be able to say 3 things, right? My purpose in life is to glorify God. I do this by being like Christ, and God knows I'm not perfect, but he expects me to be growing. This is what Peter's saying. Guys, this is how. We've got to prepare our mind. We've got to make sure our thinking is right. What are we dwelling on? We need to make sure our hope is set with the right priorities. It's not what God's doing for us, but realizing his glory that will be revealed at that time. So how are we doing living in light of eternity? Now, I always feel weird sitting at my computer typing this time up. Like, I usually write several things out and then erase it, and write several more things out and erase it, right? Because everybody's sitting in a different position. How are we doing living for eternity at work? How are we doing living for eternity when we're hanging out with our friends? While out fishing, hunting, enjoying creation, right? Pheasant opener. How are we living for eternity within those, right? And Peter's not saying we can't enjoy life. But guys, there's a better thing to aim for here. And why? Because God's God. And what God has done for you. So I'm going to pray. Oh, there he is. We'll have the worship band come up after that. So, God, I thank you for what you have done, for your wonderful saving grace, the grace that you have poured out on us at the moment of us believing. God, I thank you that you love us so much, not to leave us where we're at, but you draw us closer to you and to change. And God, I thank you for the grace that you will pour out on the day of your second coming. When you call us all home and you rid us of sin to be in your presence. God, I pray that this week, as we move about life, that you would just point out areas where we need to be more focused on eternity. We need to be more focused on the grace that you provide for us. God, I pray that you would point out areas where we need to prepare our minds. That you would just point out and convict when we need to turn off the TV. We need to put down a book. We need to stop doing what we're doing to enter into your presence. God, I pray that you would alert us to the times where this world just grips us and pulls us away from who you are. God, I pray that you would point out areas where we are not living up to your standard, and that you would give us the courage to deal with that. I thank you for your forgiveness and your saving grace. It's in your name we pray. Amen.